My sister-in-law wore a white dress to my wedding. It's just a dress. She smirked, but when I had the last laugh, she was furious because I'd already told the photographer to edit her dress in every photo. And when the final pictures arrived, she looked absolutely ridiculous. But that wasn't even the worst part. I never thought I'd be the type of person to let a little thing like a dress cause drama. But my sister-in-law sure knows how to push my buttons. It all started a few months before my wedding when I invited my fiance's entire family to our engagement party. A small thing, nothing major, just a family gathering. Of course, my future in-laws came, including the infamous Sarah, my fiance's younger sister. Sarah's always been interesting. She's one of those people who loves attention, but somehow doesn't realize she's way too much. Think loud, brash, always on the lookout for the spotlight, and shamelessly competing with anyone she feels might take it. I've always done my best to ignore her antics, but this time, she took it to a whole new level. When the invitation went out, I made it clear that it would be a formal event, but I didn't specify anything about colors. To be fair, I didn't think I needed to. It was an engagement party, not the actual wedding, so I didn't assume anyone would try to steal the show. Sarah, of course, turned up in a short, white dress. I mean, who does that? It wasn't a wedding dress or anything, but it was white, and the cut was surprisingly close to the one I'd been eyeing for my own wedding. I was trying not to let it bother me, but as soon as she walked in, I could see the smirk on her face. She knew exactly what she was doing. The worst part? She made sure to mention how she just loved wearing white, and that it was such a refreshing change from the usual colors at these things. I wasn't the type to make a scene in front of everyone, so I just bit my tongue and went about the evening. But inside, I was seething. This wasn't some small, innocent mistake. She had done this on purpose. I could see the way she acted around my fiancé, trying to get him to notice her more than me. And it was honestly starting to feel like she was trying to make me the competition rather than just supporting her brother and me as a couple. Fast forward to the actual wedding. I was walking on air. Everything was perfect until I saw Sarah again. She had somehow managed to find a white dress again. Only this time, it wasn't just white. It was a full-on bridal gown. I was livid. My mother nearly lost it too. But Sarah? She seemed totally unbothered. I approached her, trying to keep my composure, but I couldn't stop myself from asking, "Why would you wear white again, Sarah? You know that's supposed to be reserved for the bride, right?" She gave me that signature smirk and said, "Oh, come on. It's just a dress. Don't be so dramatic. You're married now. It's no big deal." And that was it. It wasn't about the dress anymore. It wasn't about her being an attention seeker. It was about her deliberately trying to ruin my day, make it about her, and get under my skin. So, I did something I wasn't exactly proud of, but I figured if she wanted drama, I'd give it to her, but in a way she'd never see coming. I whispered to the photographer, someone we had known for years and who was very much in on my plans, to make sure to edit every photo with Sarah in that white dress. She would not look like the bride in any of the pictures. I didn't care if she was in the background or posing for a group photo with the family. Every single one of her photos would have her dress completely altered, make it blend in with the surroundings, blur it out, or even add a colorful streak over it. I was tired of letting her get away with everything she did. By the end of the night, Sarah was smugly happy with herself. She thought she'd outshone me, that she had somehow won by being the center of attention, and that I would just let it slide. But when the final pictures came in, she was furious. The photos were absolutely ridiculous. In every shot she was in, her white dress was either completely washed out or replaced with some random, colorful streak. At one point, in a candid shot, her dress had turned a bizarre shade of green. I couldn't stop laughing when I saw the final edits, but Sarah? Oh, she was not laughing. I didn't expect her to take it well, but her reaction was something else. She straight up went ballistic. When I showed her the photos, she went from smug to completely irate in a split second. "What did you do to me?" she screamed, her face turning red with anger. I just shrugged. "You shouldn't have worn white. You could have picked literally any other color, but you chose to make my day about you. And honestly, the photos are way better now." I'll admit it, I loved every second of that moment. But that's when it all started to go downhill, because that wasn't even the worst part. Sarah wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. After the photos were sent out to the family, Sarah's fury didn't die down. She was calling anyone who would listen, trying to make me the villain in all of this. She even got my fiancé involved, saying that I'd ruined her reputation and embarrassed her in front of the family. Victor was stuck between trying to defend me and managing his sister's temper tantrum. I could see how this was causing some tension, and I felt guilty for dragging him into it. But part of me still couldn't help feeling vindicated. A few days later, Sarah showed up at my door uninvited. When I opened it, she didn't even bother with pleasantries. "You're going to fix those photos," she demanded, her voice icy and clipped. "You made me look ridiculous. You owe me an apology, and I want those edits undone." I stood there for a second, taking it all in, before replying calmly, "Sarah, you knew exactly what you were doing when you wore that dress. I didn't make you look ridiculous. You did that yourself. But if it makes you feel better, I'll happily let you try and explain to everyone why you thought wearing white to someone else's wedding was a good idea." That shut her down, at least for the moment. She huffed, turned on her heel, and stormed off, but I could tell this wasn't over. Sarah didn't give up easily. She spent the next couple of weeks reaching out to various family members, trying to paint me as the villain of the wedding. But the more she complained, the more it seemed like the rest of the family began to side with me, especially after they saw the photos. Everyone agreed that it was an absurd choice for her to wear white, and they could all see how much of an attention grab it had been. A couple of weeks later, when I thought things had finally calmed down, my mother-in-law called. "I think Sarah's taken this a bit too far," she said, her voice soft but concerned. "You need to fix things with her. She's devastated by what happened." I sighed. I didn't want to make peace with someone who clearly had no respect for boundaries, but I knew that at some point I'd have to address the situation with more maturity. "I'm happy to talk to her," I said carefully, "but she needs to understand that actions have consequences." Wearing a white dress to my wedding was a direct challenge. I didn't do this to hurt her. I did it because I had to stand up for myself. The tension continued for a while, but eventually Sarah started pulling back. Maybe she realized that the family wasn't on her side, or maybe she just needed time to cool down. Either way, we didn't talk about it again for a long time. And while I felt a little guilty about the way I handled it, I couldn't deny that the satisfaction of watching Sarah's smugness dissolve into complete frustration was worth it. I made my point loud and clear, and for once, it felt good to not let someone walk all over me. Months passed, and the drama surrounding the wedding slowly faded. At least, it seemed on the surface. Sarah had backed off, but I could still feel the tension between us whenever family events came around. She'd smile at me, but there was something cold behind her eyes. She wasn't as brazen anymore, and I'd even caught her eyeing my outfits with that familiar, competitive gaze. It was clear that she hadn't forgotten what had happened, even if she'd never admit it. It was around Christmas time when things took another turn. We were at my in-laws' house for the holiday dinner, and I noticed Sarah was acting a little off. She wasn't the life of the party, like she usually tried to be, but instead, she seemed quieter, almost withdrawn. The whole family was gathered in the living room, exchanging gifts when she got up abruptly. "Excuse me," she muttered before heading toward the back of the house. A few minutes later, I overheard her talking to my mother-in-law in the hallway, though their conversation was hushed. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but the words, "You need to talk to her," caught my attention. My curiosity got the better of me, and I crept closer, just enough to hear the tail end of the exchange. She's the one who started all of this, but now you want me to apologize to her? Sarah's voice was tight, almost shaky. She's the one who ruined everything. I didn't do anything wrong. I just wore a dress. She's crazy. She just tried to control everything. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Hearing her try to rewrite history like that made my blood boil. I wanted to march in there and tell her off right then and there, but I forced myself to stay calm. If there was one thing I learned over the past months, it was that reacting out of anger didn't solve anything. Instead, I decided to take a step back and observe. I didn't need to stoop to her level, especially not when the rest of the family had seen her behavior for what it was. If Sarah wanted to play the victim, she could try, but I wasn't going to make it easy for her. I spent the rest of the night keeping to myself, chatting with other family members, and enjoying the holiday spirit. But as the evening wound down and people started trickling out, I saw Sarah lingering by the door, watching me. She wasn't smiling anymore, but I couldn't tell if it was frustration or something else. I thought the night was over when she approached me just before I was about to leave. "I don't know why you have to make everything so difficult," she said, her voice low. "You always make me out to be the bad guy." I looked at her, trying to gauge what was really going on. She looked tired, her usual bravado completely gone. "Sarah," I began carefully, "I'm not the one who made things difficult. You chose to wear white to my wedding. You chose to make it about you. I wasn't the one who started this. I just dealt with it in my own way." She flinched slightly, but then her expression hardened again. "You're impossible. You think you're so much better than me." I took a deep breath. "I don't think I'm better than you, but I am better than the way you've treated me. I'm not going to let you get away with things like that anymore." I didn't expect her to understand, but I wasn't backing down. Before she could say anything else, I turned and walked out the door, leaving her standing there. As I drove home that night, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. The tension between us wasn't over, but for the first time, I felt like I had control over the situation. That wasn't the last of Sarah's attempts to undermine me, but it was the beginning of something different. She didn't know it yet, but the game had changed. The following family gathering was the one where everything finally came to a head. It wasn't a special occasion, just a Sunday dinner at my in-laws' place. But it felt different. Sarah had been quieter than usual, barely making eye contact with me and everyone else, almost like she was waiting for something. I had a feeling she wasn't done trying to manipulate the situation, and I was right. As the evening wore on, I could tell Sarah was getting more and more agitated. She had a way of looking at me whenever the conversation turned to the wedding, but instead of trying to make herself the center of attention like before, she just simmered in silence. I wasn't in the mood for another confrontation, so I kept to myself, but I wasn't going to let her dictate the energy of the room anymore. It was as if the roles had reversed. She was no longer the one everyone had to tiptoe around. Finally, she couldn't keep it in any longer. In the middle of dessert, Sarah suddenly stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Can we all just stop pretending like this didn't happen?" she asked, her voice shaking slightly but still holding that bite. I'm sick of walking on eggshells around her. Everyone at the table froze, and I could feel the tension building. My mother-in-law looked at Sarah with an uncomfortable expression, but Sarah was clearly waiting for me to respond. So I did. "I'm not pretending anything, Sarah," I said calmly, meeting her gaze. "You wore a white dress to my wedding. You knew exactly what you were doing, and now you're acting like I'm the problem for reacting to it." Sarah's face flushed, but she didn't back down. "I'm not asking for an apology. I'm asking for things to go back to normal. I've never done anything to you, and you're acting like I'm some kind of villain." "Normal," I repeated, barely able to keep the disbelief from my voice. "How do you expect things to go back to normal when you keep pushing boundaries and trying to steal the spotlight? I'm done letting you do that." There was a long pause before my father-in-law spoke up, surprising me. Sarah, I think it's time you start realizing that you don't always get to be the center of attention. His tone wasn't harsh, but it was firm. You've pushed people away, and now you're acting like you're the victim. That's not how things work around here. The silence in the room was thick. Sarah stood there, her chest rising and falling with frustration, but there was something different in her eyes now. She wasn't winning this time, and she knew it. For once, she had no comebacks, no way to deflect. It was as if she finally saw the truth in everything I'd been saying, but she wasn't ready to admit it. I stood up slowly, not wanting to make a scene, but needing to make my point. Look, I'm done with the games. I don't need to justify myself to you anymore. I'm not going to keep letting you walk all over me. With that, I turned and walked away, leaving the room behind. Sarah's presence didn't feel like a threat anymore. It felt like a distant echo, something that had once loomed large in my life, but was now nothing more than a whisper. In the days that followed, I didn't have to deal with Sarah's antics anymore. The family had seen her for what she was, and though it wasn't a dramatic confrontation, it was clear to everyone where the problem lay. For once, I didn't feel like the second-class citizen in my own family. Sarah wasn't my competition. She never had been. And as for the photos, they became a quiet joke among the family. Even Sarah had to admit that, despite everything, the edited photos were some of the most memorable of the day. We all had a laugh at her expense, but in a way that didn't hurt. It was just a reminder that the drama she tried to stir up didn't have the power she thought it did. In the end, I got exactly what I wanted: peace. Not in the way I'd originally envisioned it, but in a way that made me feel stronger, more confident in who I was and what I wouldn't allow. Sarah, for all her attempts, had finally been put in her place, and I couldn't have been more satisfied. So, here's where it stands. I did what I had to do to stand my ground, but I'm still wondering if I went too far. I mean, maybe I shouldn't have had the photos edited or let it escalate like that. I definitely didn't expect things to get as heated as they did, but I also don't regret defending myself. Am I the a-hole here for making sure Sarah didn't get away with trying to outshine me? Or did I take it too far? I'd love to hear other opinions on this. If you enjoyed this wild family drama, make sure to like and subscribe for more stories like this one. And let me know in the comments, how would you have handled a situation like this? Would you have taken the same approach? Or would you have done things differently? Don't forget to share this with your friends so they can join in on the conversation too.